The doors of the throne room slammed shut behind me before I even understood where I was standing. My name is Daniel Cole, and 3 minutes ago, I was arguing with a supply officer about a broken transport pod. Now I was being shoved forward by 2 guards covered in black scale armor, into a hall so large I did not have time to think about how strange this was. The floor beneath me was cold stone, polished so smooth it reflected the torchlight like water. Ahead of me, rows of alien nobles stood frozen in place, and every single one of them was trembling. Then, without warning, they all dropped. Not knelt, dropped, like their knees had been cut from under them. I heard the sound before I understood it. A wave of armored knees hitting stone, one after another, spreading through the hall like a ripple in a pond. Hundreds of bodies folding at once. Some of the delegates made small sounds of pain as they fell, gritting their teeth like they were fighting something invisible and losing. I stood there, confused, looking around at a room full of powerful beings, suddenly reduced to trembling shapes on the floor. I did not kneel. I did not feel any reason to. At the far end of the hall, on a black throne carved from what looked like fused obsidian, sat a woman. She was pale in a way that did not look sickly, but ancient, like moonlight given form. Her eyes were the color of dried blood, calm and endlessly patient, the eyes of someone who had watched 1,000 generations rise and fall beneath her. She wore a crown that seemed to drink the torchlight rather than reflect it. This was Queen Naira Voss, ruler of the Obsidian Court, a power so old that some species did not even have written records of a time before her. I had been told, in a rushed briefing an hour earlier, that she commanded absolute obedience through a force nobody could explain. Not magic exactly, not technology exactly, something older than both. The scientists on my ship had called it a compulsion field, an aura that forced compliance on a level deeper than fear. Every species that had ever come within a mile of her radiated pure terror, except, apparently, me. I felt nothing. No pressure in my chest, no invisible hand pushing me down, no whisper in my mind telling me to obey. I simply stood there, in the middle of a hall filled with kneeling giants, feeling slightly awkward, like I had walked into the wrong meeting. The Queen's eyes moved across the crowd of bowed heads until they landed on me. Her expression did not change, but something in the air shifted. I felt every guard in the room turn to look at me at once. "Human," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried across the entire hall without effort, like the stone itself had been built to deliver her words. "Why do you remain standing?" I opened my mouth, then closed it again, because I genuinely did not have a clever answer. The truth was the only thing I had. "I don't know what everyone else is feeling," I said. "There's nothing pushing me down. I'm just standing here." A murmur rippled through the kneeling crowd, quiet gasps, the kind of sound people make when they witness something forbidden. One of the guards beside me grabbed my shoulder and forced me down by pure strength, his grip like an iron clamp, and my knees hit the stone hard. "There," he muttered. "Now you kneel like the rest." But I was not kneeling because of her. I was kneeling because a very strong alien had physically forced me to the ground. The difference mattered more than anyone in that room seemed to realize, and judging by the look on the Queen's face, she realized it immediately. She rose from her throne. The whole room seemed to hold its breath as she descended the steps, her movements slow and deliberate, like she had all the time in existence and no reason to hurry. She crossed the hall in silence until she stood only a few feet from me, looking down with an expression I could not quite read. Curiosity, maybe, or something older than curiosity, something that had not been given a name in a very long time. "Release him," she said. The guard let go instantly, stumbling back like he had been burned. I stood up, brushing dust off my uniform, very aware that I was now the only person in the room not on the ground, and very aware that this seemed to matter a great deal to everyone around me. "Do you know what I am?" the Queen asked. "I was told you're the ruler of this system," I said, "and that everyone who meets you ends up on the floor." "They kneel," she said, "because my presence commands it. It is not a request. It is not fear in the way your species understands fear. It is written into the blood of every creature that has ever stood before me, going back further than any record your people have kept. No one chooses to kneel before me. They simply do." "Well," I said. Nobody told my blood that. For a long moment, she said nothing. I could hear the crowd around us breathing, hundreds of frightened creatures, too afraid to even whisper, watching this exchange like it was the most dangerous thing they had ever witnessed. Then the queen tilted her head, studying me, the way someone studies an insect that has wandered somewhere it should not exist. "You believe this is a joke," she said. "No," I said honestly. "I believe I'm confused, and I believe I'd like to understand what's happening before I say something that gets me killed." A flicker of something crossed her face. It might have been amusement. It was gone before I could be sure. "Walk with me," she said, and turned without waiting for a response. I glanced at the guards, who looked at me like I had just been handed a death sentence wrapped in politeness. Nobody moved to stop me, so I followed her, walking past rows of kneeling nobles who did not dare lift their heads to watch us pass. We entered a smaller chamber behind the throne, lit by soft blue flame instead of torches. The doors closed behind us, and for the first time since I had arrived, I was alone with her. "For 3,000 years," she said, without turning to face me, "every living being that has entered my presence has knelt. Warriors who feared nothing, rulers of empires larger than this one, machines built without emotion, without fear circuits of any kind, and even they bowed, because the compulsion is not fear, it is deeper than that. It is a command written into existence itself." "And I didn't feel it," I said. "No," she said, "you did not." She turned to face me now, and up close, I could see details I had missed from a distance. Faint lines around her eyes that suggested exhaustion, not age. A stillness in her that felt less like power and more like isolation, the kind of quiet that comes from being alone in a crowded room for a very long time. "Do you know how long it has been," she said, "since someone looked at me the way you are looking at me right now? How am I looking at you? Like I am simply a person standing in front of you," she said. "Not a force, not a ruler, not a nightmare given shape. A person." I did not have a good answer for that, so I stayed quiet, which seemed to be the right choice, because she continued speaking. "My compulsion was not something I asked for," she said. "It was given to my bloodline before I was born, a gift or a curse, depending on who you ask. It ensured order. It ensured that no war could ever be fought against me, because no army could stand in my presence long enough to raise a weapon. It made me untouchable. It also made me utterly alone, because nothing that kneels can ever truly speak to the one it kneels before." "That sounds lonely," I said, before I could stop myself. She looked at me sharply, and for a moment, I thought I had said something dangerous. Then her expression softened, just slightly, just enough that I noticed. "It is," she said, "more than your kind could understand." I thought about that for a moment, standing in a room lit by strange blue fire, talking to a being who had ruled over dozens of worlds without ever having a single honest conversation. "I'm not trying to disrespect you," I said. "I want to be clear about that. I just don't feel whatever it is that makes everyone else drop to the floor. If I did, I'd probably be down there with them." "I believe you," she said. "That is what troubles me most. This is not defiance. It is simply absence. You are the first creature in 3,000 years who has stood before me without choice or compulsion, playing any part in it. Every word you speak to me now is entirely your own." There was something in the way she said that last part, a kind of hunger, not for power, but for something far more basic. Genuine conversation, something she had not experienced in longer than most civilizations had existed. A guard entered the chamber suddenly, dropping to one knee even as he spoke. "My queen," he said, voice tight with urgency, "the outer colonies report movement. The Ashcrown fleet has crossed the border. They are testing your borders again." The queen's calm expression did not change, but I noticed her hands tighten slightly at her sides. "The Ashcrown," she said, more to herself than to either of us, "have grown bold in recent years. They believe my compulsion weakens with time. They send ships to test that theory every few seasons, and every few seasons, I am forced to remind them why that theory is wrong." "What happens if they're right?" I asked. "What happens if it does weaken?" She turned to look at me again, and this time there was no calm in her expression, only a flicker of something raw and unguarded. Then I lose everything I have built, she said, because everything I have built rests on fear, not loyalty. 10,000 nobles kneel before me, not because they respect me, but because their bodies force them to. The day that compulsion fades even slightly, every one of them will remember that they never chose to serve me, and on that day, they will turn. The weight of that sentence settled over the room like a physical thing. I understood, in that moment, something that maybe nobody else in her court had ever understood. She was not simply feared, she was trapped. A queen surrounded by subjects who obeyed her out of biological compulsion rather than choice, ruling an empire built on a foundation that could crumble the instant her power faltered even slightly. And she knew it. She had probably known it for centuries. I could help, I said. The words left my mouth before I had fully thought them through, but once they were out, I realized I meant them. She studied me for a long moment. You are a soldier from a small, unremarkable species that has existed for less time than the dust on my throne room floor. What could you possibly offer me? I don't know, I admitted. But you just told me every single person who serves you does it because your power forces them to. I'm the only person in this entire empire who would be standing next to you by choice. That has to count for something. Something shifted in her expression, subtle but unmistakable. It was the closest thing to surprise I had seen from her since I arrived. The guard, still kneeling, cleared his throat nervously. My queen, the fleet awaits your command. She looked at him, then back at me, weighing something in her mind that I could not fully understand. Come with me, she said finally, to the war chamber. I want to see how you react to something that will actually threaten your life, human. I want to know if your strange resistance holds under real pressure, or if it simply fails you the moment something with sharp teeth stands in front of you. I followed her out of the chamber and down a long corridor lined with ancient banners, each one representing a species or a kingdom she had conquered or absorbed over the centuries. The war room, when we reached it, was filled with officers hunched over glowing maps that showed positions of fleets scattered across star systems I had never heard of. Every officer in the room dropped to their knees the moment she entered. I remained standing beside her, and this time, nobody tried to force me down. They had clearly already heard what happened in the throne room. Show me the ash crown positions, she said. A map flared to life above the central table, showing a cluster of red markers advancing steadily toward a line of blue markers that represented her border defenses. They will reach the outer colonies within 6 hours, an officer reported, still kneeling, eyes fixed on the floor. Our garrison there is small. If they push through, the colonies will fall before reinforcements arrive. Send the second fleet, the queen said. My queen, the officer said carefully, the second fleet is 3 days away. Even at full speed, they cannot reach the colonies before the ash crown does. The room fell silent. I could feel the tension pressing down on everyone present, except me, which felt strange in a way I was starting to get used to. What about the ships already stationed near the border? I asked. Every head in the room turned toward me. Speaking without being addressed directly was apparently not something people did in this court. The queen, however, did not seem offended. If anything, she looked intrigued. Continue, she said. You have a garrison at the colonies already, I said, thinking it through as I spoke. Small but present. If the Ash Crown fleet believes it's walking into an easy victory, they won't expect resistance. Even a small, well-placed defense could slow them down enough to give your second fleet time to arrive. The garrison would be destroyed, the officer said, shaking his head. It is not strong enough to hold against a full fleet. It doesn't need to win, I said. It just needs to survive long enough. Delay isn't the same as victory, but sometimes it's just as useful. The queen looked at the map for a long moment, then back at me. Explain your reasoning, she said. I stepped closer to the table, studying the positions of the ships. The Ash Crown fleet is moving in a straight line, confident, because they expect no real resistance. If your garrison pulls back into the asteroid field near the colony, instead of meeting them head-on, they lose the advantage of open space. Their larger ships will struggle to maneuver. It buys time, and it costs the Ash Crown resources they didn't expect to spend. The officer who had spoken earlier looked at the queen, clearly waiting for her to dismiss the suggestion. Instead, she studied the map for a long moment, her red eyes tracing the path I had described. "Send the order," she said finally. "Garrison forces fall back into the asteroid field. Hold position until the second fleet arrives." The officer hesitated only a moment before obeying, relaying the command through a communication device on the table. The Queen turned to me. "If this fails, the colony falls, and the cost will be measured in lives, not simply territory." "I understand," I said, but standing still and letting them walk through the front door wasn't going to save anyone either. She studied me for a long moment, and I realized the entire war room had gone quiet, watching this exchange between the ancient ruler and the one person in her empire who spoke to her like an equal. The next several hours passed slowly. Reports came in from the border, updates on fleet positions, small pieces of information that painted a picture of a battle unfolding light years away. I stayed in the war room the entire time, standing beside the Queen, watching as the situation shifted in small increments. The Ash Crown fleet, expecting an easy advance, had indeed slowed when they encountered the garrison pulling back into the asteroid field. Their larger ships struggled to navigate the dense rock formations, giving the smaller, faster garrison vessels room to strike and retreat without engaging directly. It was not a victory. It was exactly what I had described: a delay, a stall, buying precious hours. When the second fleet finally arrived, the Ash Crown forces, already worn down and disorganized from hours of frustrating skirmishes, retreated rather than face a full engagement. The colony held. When the final report came through, confirming the retreat, a wave of visible relief passed through the war room. Officers who had been tense for hours finally allowed themselves to breathe. The Queen turned to me, and for the first time since I had met her, something that might have been the beginning of a smile touched the corner of her mouth. "You saved lives today," she said quietly, so only I could hear it. "We saved lives today," I corrected. "It was your fleet, your officers. I just pointed out an option nobody else wanted to say out loud." "That is precisely the point," she said. "Every person in this room would have followed my command without question, even if it led to disaster. You were the only one willing to offer a different path, because you were the only one not bound by fear of contradicting me." We stood there for a moment, the war room slowly emptying around us as officers returned to their duties, none of them quite meeting my eyes, though the fear in their expressions had shifted into something closer to uncertainty. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," the Queen said, "you remain here, in my court, as an advisor. Not because I command it, but because I am asking it." I raised an eyebrow. "You're asking me?" "It seems to be the only method that works on you," she said, and this time there was no mistaking the dry humor in her voice. I thought about my old life, the broken transport pod, the argument with the supply officer, all of it feeling impossibly distant now. "I'll stay," I said, "on one condition." "Careful," she said. "Few have ever set conditions with me." "I already know that," I said. "But I'd like to actually understand this place, not kneel to it, not fear it, just understand it. If I'm going to help you hold an empire together, I want to know what I'm holding together." She considered this for a long moment, then nodded once. Agreed. Later that night, standing on a balcony overlooking the vast dark sprawl of her city, I thought about everything that had happened since I first walked through those enormous doors. An empire built on fear, a queen more isolated than any prisoner, and somehow, through nothing more than an accident of biology, I had ended up standing beside her instead of beneath her. I still did not fully understand what it was that made every other creature in the galaxy drop to their knees in her presence. I probably never would, but I understood something else now, something that seemed far more important. Sometimes the most powerful thing in the room is not the one everyone fears. It is the one who simply refuses to kneel.